What exactly happened to the Chris Farley version of Shrek? Well, today we're going to find out.
Arsing around.
Ew, Dad!
Ooh, Mama like.
Who's making this stuff?
Okay, let me explain. In today's program, we're going to be taking a look at some unreleased deleted scenes and lost early versions to DreamWorks movies. And hopefully by the end, there should be some added context as to why this exists. And if this sounds like your cup of tea and you want to see more videos just like this one, then subscribing would be humbly appreciated. Alright, with the context out of the way, let's begin our adventure. Initially, the movie Megamind wasn't meant to start with an opening backstory. It would have had Megamind already as an adult being evil. The opening set scene would have been the prison breakout, with Megamind sending cornflakes with letters to Minion, who would piece together the words of what the plan was. Although eventually an opening backstory was made, to make Megamind feel far more empathetic for the beginning. Later in the film, Megamind and Minion retrieved DNA from Metro Man via his dandruff. The filmmakers were concerned that audiences would ask as to why the villains didn't go and seek out Metro Man's body, and then find out too early that that body isn't Metro Man's. So initially they animated the skeleton turning into dust. But then eventually the filmmakers came to the conclusion that that aspect of the plot didn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Something else that was added into the beginning of the film was seeing on how the dehydration gun worked. It was not only just done as an introduction for the gun, but it was additionally done so the viewers knew that the character Bernard didn't die, since we don't get to see him being rehydrated until the post-credit scene. Side note, the last that we see of Bernard, Megamind puts him in his pocket. So does that mean he was with Megamind for the whole duration of the movie? Here's a fun bit of trivia. Megamind was originally envisioned to be a live-action movie. So in the initial script, instead of transforming into Titan Space Dad, he was supposed to transform into Mr. Miyagi. It was even hoped that Pat Morita would reprise his role in the film, while this version of the film never came to pass. A visual illustration of Pat Morita still made a cameo in the film. There was another deleted scene that would have introduced Hal as the superhero much earlier, where a news anchor would have interviewed him, asking him how to spell his superhero name. Hal spells his own name wrong, although this sight gag was retained for one moment in the film. The film starting in a non-linear style, such as showing the climax of the movie with Megamind falling to his death while telling the story, was an incredibly late addition to the film. This aspect was suggested by director Del Toro. He was treated to an early private screening of the film, just 1 month before production was set to be done. He made a couple of suggestions to the filmmakers on how they could make the film even better. It additionally involved cutting out 7 minutes of finished animation from the film. When it came to Megamind's home media release, only one deleted scene got included, that being the toothbrush scene that lasts for about 30 seconds. Fans of the movie have compiled together fragmented cutscenes sourced from advertisements and animators' show reels in order to piece together what some of the deleted scenes may have looked like. Altogether they contribute a little less than 3 minutes, leaving 4 minutes worth of cut content still being inaccessible to view from the public. While I'm sure that the final movie we have is the superior cut, if there is lost media to be seen, then the fans are gonna be restless until the content finally re-emerges. One of the earliest aspects that was developed on for Madagascar were the penguins, as they were initially conceived for an entirely different project. In 1998, DreamWorks began pre-production on an unmade animated movie called Rockumentary. The idea for the project was to do a semi-remake on the Beatles movie A Hard Day's Night, where the penguins would have represented the Fab Four. However, DreamWorks and PDI failed to get clearance for the music, so the project was ultimately shelved. When producer Morelli Soria and director Tom McGrath moved over to the Madagascar project, they borrowed over aspects of the penguins from the unmade movie and re-include them for Madagascar. The penguins' roles were initially fairly small to the film, but it was eventually decided to bring back the penguins for the second half of the film. As for Rockumentary, aside from being briefly mentioned in a 2005 article, there's scantingly very little information about the unmade project. We don't even know what the plot would have been largely about, or even how much of a remake it would have been to the Beatles film. During the early versions of Madagascar, the character of Melman was originally meant to be an okapi, a type of mammal related to the giraffe that's found in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Eventually, the filmmakers decided to make Melman into a giraffe instead, as they felt that it fit the character far better, and giraffes are slightly more widely known to the general public. Eventually, an okapi would appear in the Madagascar franchise, in the Valentine special, Merrily Madagascar, being a love interest for Marty, although she's only referred to in the Madagascar special as the Okapi Girl, with her name never being revealed. And then there was the character of Owen, who appeared in the Madagascar preschool series, Madagascar A Little Wild. Initially, part of the plot of the original film was that Gloria was meant to be pregnant after participating into the zoo's breeding program. Over the course of the story, Melman and Gloria would have developed a romantic bond. By the movie's end, they would have officially become a couple, with Melman committed to raising Gloria's baby as if it was his own. However, the reason why this didn't end up being in the final film, it was because the test audience found this rather peculiar. Gloria's and Melman's romance would be brought back in for the sequel, with the filmmakers confident that now, with the general audience being used to the characters from the first film, it would feel more natural in the sequel, and wouldn't seemingly come out of left field. However, Gloria's voice actress, Jada Pinkett Smith, was unaware of the movie's changes, so as she began promoting Madagascar, she openly told the press that Gloria was pregnant. As soon as the filmmakers caught wind of this, they urgently reached out to Jada, informing her about the movie's changes. This somewhat indicates that this plotline made it quite far into development, far enough along where the cast recorded their lines accordingly, so perhaps at the very least, there's a very rough version of this early incarnation of Madagascar that made it to some visual form. However, no clips from this rendition of Madagascar has ever been publicly shown. Furthermore, when the movie got its DVD release, there were no deleted scenes included as a bonus feature. By the way, in Gloria's original concept design, her haunches would have taken about 50% of her body shape.
We wanted Gloria to be big and robust, but to be a beautiful hippo and not make her a character where she's worried about eating or has a weight problem or anything like that, because hippos are 800 pounds and they're proud of it.
A couple of months ago, an early teaser trailer for Madagascar had leaked its way online. The trailer had many work in progress shots in it. Not just very rough animation of the movie, but also having temporary voice actors.
The penguins are going to the wild, so why can't I? Marty, the penguins are psychotic.
This trailer has two shots in particular where the composition would be changed for the final movie. Gloria does a different pose for when she breaks through the wall, and Alex's run-in with the elderly lady would have had him exiting on screen right.
Lady, what is wrong with you?
Bad kitty.
Marty!
There were some additional lines in the final film.
Oh! Get a grip on yourselves, people! Bad kitty.
There are also some exclusive shots that can only be seen in the advertisements of the movie.
A night on the town.
Let's go. What? Come on, we can be back by morning.
The trailer features this exclusive shot with Marty that doesn't turn up in the final film. As well, the next shot in the trailer, featuring Marty and Alex, their composition is ever so slightly different in the final movie.
Let's go. What? The wild. Come on. Let's go. What? Come on, we can be back by morning.
In the initial teaser trailer featuring Ben Stiller, there's this line from Alex that doesn't turn up in the final film.
There's one thing I've learned as a lifelong New Yorker. It's never trust your instincts.
As well, the shot with Alex flying out of the crate was completely different from the teaser when compared to in the movie. It's clear that they were still finalising a lot of the shots, just shortly before the release of the film. There are as well some shots from the advertisements, where they may have been composited together just exclusively for the advertisements, such as an additional line from Marty during What a Wonderful World montage.
Hey, little ducky.
Rated PG starts May 27th.
And this line from Melman
Nature! It's all over me! Get it off!
would be included to be reworked for this shot for the movie's initial teaser trailer.
Nature! It's all over me!
You know what? After assessing all these clips, I'm starting to feel a little bit peckish. I could do with a wee snack. I think I feel in the mood for a Kit Kat bar. I'll probably go for a chunky bar. I generally prefer them over the normal ones, because I like them big, and I like them chunky. I like them big, I like them lumpy, I like them round. The initial animation that was completed for Moto Moto had him coming across much more aggressive and seedier. The test audience didn't take to Moto Moto, so the animators went back readjusting several of the shots. And in the filmmaker's words, they made him slightly more dumber. When Alec Baldwin was brought on board to play the villain of the film, he was initially meant to play himself, hiding out in Africa, avoiding the PETA organization. Part of the plot was that he was meant to set up his own theatre school, but instead of training the actors, he would have made them done forced labor, building his hunting lodge.
Yeah, he said, they're building his lodge and they're complaining about having to build it and say, when are we going to start acting lessons? And he goes, suppose you had to play the part of a carpenter or a painter, you'd be well prepared.
Marty?
Eventually, though, this aspect of the plot was scrapped. Alec Baldwin would stay on board playing the villain of the film, but in the form of a lion antagonist named Makunga. Naturally, being a DreamWorks movie, the Madagascar franchise does have a fair few innuendos, as I'll call them. However, there were some naughty jokes that didn't make it into the second movie. A deleted bit of line that didn't make it into the final film was during the rites of passage scene, where an indication of how one becomes mature in the pride is via the act of circumcision.
Yeah, when his dad was explaining it to him, he used to say, there's not going to be any snipping, is there? And then Zuba would laugh and say, not if you're quick.
Yeah.
There were additionally deleted lines that makes fun of the animal name Dik-Dik, a genus of a miniature antelope.
We used to have a lot of dick jokes, remember?
Yeah.
And then we were afraid that people wouldn't know that was a real animal.
Yeah.
When Melman is carried off away for the sacrifice, all the animals were meant to be chanting sacrifice. However, the filmmakers felt that this made the movie seem a little too dark, so this audio was deleted out. But if you look carefully, you can just see the animals mouthing sacrifice in the background. Initially, it was intended by the filmmakers that we would have cut back to Mort being chased by the shark, as he makes his journey across Africa, but ultimately it was decided to rid away with this subplot. Additionally, in the sequel we're introduced to Alex's parents. His mother, Flory, played by Sherry Shepherd, and his father, named Zuba, was played by Bernie Mac. Sadly, Mac passed away 3 months before the movie was released. In fact, Bernie Mac prematurely died before production on the movie had concluded. As a result, they didn't get all the lines off Mac that they wanted, especially for the film's ending. As a result, the filmmakers reviewed a lot of the cut content with Zuba to find dialogue that would be appropriate for the movie's ending. Director Eric Darnell found this small snippet of dialogue that was intended to be used for a cut song and dance number.
Dad? What's wrong? I just thought we could hang out a bit and... Oh, you got me!
I got you, son.
You got me with you did my thing. You brought it back around on me. I love it.
It somewhat nicely bookends the whole movie, as it winks to this little moment at the beginning of the film.
Ooh, you're a strange kid. You're a strange one.
The filmmakers revealed in the audio commentary that there was a great selection of cut content from Zuba to choose from. However, the home media release of Madagascar 2 didn't include any of this material on its bonus features. And in fact, just like the original movie, there are no deleted scenes featured on the sequel's DVD release. All of the cut content from the Madagascar franchise is still likely locked away in the DreamWorks archive. In 2004, just 1 year after the publication of the first How to Train Your Dragon book, the rights were acquired by DreamWorks. And after her work on Over the Hedge, producer Bonnie Arnold aided in development for the film, and would go on to oversee the rest of the franchise. Set to originally direct the film was Peter Hastings, who had previously worked on the Disney movie California Bears, and would later go on to direct another DreamWorks movie, Dogman. And aiding him as secondary director was David Soren, who had previously worked on Shark Tale, and would aid with later DreamWorks projects, Turbo, Boss Baby, and Captain Underpants. The version of the film that the directors were working on was quite faithful to the original book. Reportedly, it was quite light-hearted and whimsical, and would have easily appealed to younger viewers. However, there was a sense at DreamWorks that the movie wasn't exactly working. It was eventually decided to bring on board a new team to oversee the project. Chris Sanders, who had previously worked at Disney on the Lilo and Stitch movie, was brought in as the new director. Alongside him, he called in his co-directing mate, Dean DeBola, as a secondary director. They felt the main issue with the plot was that it somewhat contradicted itself. For example, the Vikings were meant to be at war with the dragons. And then alongside that, as part of their culture, teenage Vikings would collect dragon eggs. So you're at war with your enemy and at the same time you're raising their kids? They felt the story would only really work if it was one or the other, not a compromise. The directors had many different story meetings with Jeffrey Katzenberg, discussing and fine-tuning the story, first worrying about the plot beats and world building before moving on to the characters.
Whoa, where do you think you're going?
Such as agreeing that the Vikings and dragons being at war was a far more compelling story. Another aspect that was changed was Hiccup's relationship with Toothless. Instead of teaming up with a dragon that he befriends, he captures a dragon and keeps it secret. Going for a forbidden friendship angle, Toothless was swapped out to be a different species of dragon. The original Toothless model, known as the Terrible Terror in the book, was repurposed to represent the species in the final film. Toothless was turned into a Night Fury, a species of dragon that was completely made up for the film. Sanders cited that the Night Fury had to be the most fearsome dragon of them all, and additionally created Toothless to be the most romanticized design of a dragon. Typically, for a main lead for a CG film, it takes over a year to design and make the rigs. But because of the left turn in production, the team only had 1 month to make a brand new Toothless model. Initially, Chris Sanders was stipulated that he could only change a third of the movie, as it was by that time 80% complete. But after his proposal of completely reshaping the film, it was quite evident that the movie needed to be started again from scratch. To save time, all of the assets made from the original version of the film were reused. Just Toothless and the big dragon at the finale were the only characters that were designed or redesigned for when Chris Sanders came on board. Hiccup and Astrid had a very minor remodification for the new version of the film. Reportedly, the final film ended up being far more mature than what the initial version of the movie was going to be. Very few elements from the original version of How to Train Your Dragon has been released to the public. A 33-second test clip made back in 2008 has resurfaced online, It features Hiccup dealing with an early version of Toothless, using unused audio from actor Jay Baruchel, the original voice for Hiccup in the trilogy. It's so far our only glimpse into the original version of the story. Antz with a Z. The second computer animated movie ever released, and DreamWorks Pictures' very first animated movie. It has everything you want for your family film. An incestual relationship between the main leads. I mean, they all come from the same mum, right?
You know, I was gonna let you become part of my most erotic fantasies.
Erotic sexual fantasies, and we decided that was just a little
One
too
step
much.
too far.
Colourful dialogue.
What are you bitching about?
And our comedic relief for the film are two horny wasps.
My big, strong pheromone factory.
Who one of them instantly dies after their introduction.
Oh, Muffy! No! Oh, no!
Yeah, Antz is pretty gnarly, isn't it?
I liked having sex with him.
The idea for Antz initially came from an unproduced film concept at Walt Disney Animation, initially pitched at the company back in 1988, following the story of a pacifist ant trying to teach his militaristic colony a less violent way of life. Further plot details were also borrowed from another unmade film concept, titled Bugs, Lights Out, being about microscopic robots disassembling machinery. This concept was developed at PDI back in 1991. The film we know as Antz fully started its development back in 1996. Although, over the years, there's been certain allegations made against the movie that Antz was inspired on a certain Disney and Pixar property. According to John Lasseter, he told Jeffrey Katzenberg about the development of A Bug's Life in October of 1995, and was fairly open about all aspects of the movie. On reflection, Lasseter can recall Katzenberg asking very specific questions about the movie. After the release of Shrek, Steve Jobs can recall Katzenberg approaching him, stating he had never heard the pitch for A Bug's Life before. Initially, Antz was scheduled to be released in March of 1999. However, Katzenberg had his eyes set to release Antz much earlier. In David A. Price's book, The Pixar Touch, he mentions an unconfirmed quote from Katzenberg, where he would give the PDI staff working on the film a rich financial incentive to finish the movie at any cost, just so they could beat it to theaters before A Bug's Life. And it did happen. Antz received a general release on October 2nd of 1998, and A Bug's Life received a general release close to 2 months later on the 20th of November. Steve Jobs, head of Pixar at the time, rang up Katzenberg fuming over the change in release date. However, Katzenberg made Jobs an offer. He would delay the production of Antz if they could move the release date of A Bug's Life, as it was rather close to the release of The Prince of Egypt, as it was originally scheduled to be released in early December, little less than 2 weeks after A Bug's Life, and didn't want the Pixar movie to interfere with Prince of Egypt's box office earnings. However, Jobs responded that he couldn't do anything to persuade Disney to delay the release of A Bug's Life. In Katzenberg's eyes, this felt like a betrayal, as he aided the Pixar team to greenlight Toy Story right when they were on the verge of bankruptcy. Quoting Katzenberg, "I was the one guy that was there for you back then, and now you're allowing them to use you to screw me?" As well, during the exact same time, he didn't view Disney very wholesomely, as he was currently in a lawsuit battle against the company, not being promised the money he was owed, and he eventually won that court case in 1999. Anyway, enough about the controversial stuff, let's talk about some deleted scenes. None of the cut content from Antz has ever been included on the film's home media releases. Neither have they ever leaked their way online, so please excuse the lack of visuals. There were some fairly gruesome shots that were removed out for the final termite war scene, such as a termite holding the ant to the camera in a similar fashion of a dog shaking a rabbit, and the termite that chases Z was going to be self-impaled and died. In the final film, the termite dies for no explicit reason. Although if you look very carefully, you can just about see the sharp objects that the termite would have been impaled on. Initially, the scene with Princess Bala waking up along the shores of the lake was meant to be much longer. With Z still asleep, Princess Bala realizes that she's alone for the first time. Downtime that she isn't used to being a princess. This scene is somewhat available via a leaked demo reel, showcasing unfinished animation from the movie. However, it's a rather abridged version that doesn't have all the crucial shots. As well featured in the demo reel, there were some trimmed lines from General Mandible during the finale.
What are you saying? We are the colony.
Not anymore. You're the past colony.
As well as some alternative animation.
I am the colony.
Oh, look out! Oh, look out!
The initial teaser trailer to the movie showed the first 2 minutes of the movie with Z in his therapy session. However, in the teaser trailer version of this scene, we get a few extra lines from the therapist, perhaps added in exclusively for the trailer.
Yes, Z, you are insignificant. I am? Being an ant is being able to say, I'm meaningless, you're meaningless. Well, time is up. That'll be $150.
Going back to the swearing of the movie.
What are you bitching about?
When the movie aired on British kids channel CBBC, this was their attempt to censor the line.
And ever since we were little, I've been listening to you complain. What are you complaining about?
Every other minor swear word and the inappropriate dialogue was completely cut out of the broadcast.
You know, I was gonna let you become part of my most erotic fantasies.
Out of your league.
I guess what you prefer is old blood and guts. Boy, you really chose the right husband.
I mean, if this Z cares so much about us, then why isn't he here? I'll tell you why. Because Z doesn't give a damn about us. I mean, if this Z cares so much about us, then why isn't he here? Z is no hero.
But when the movie aired on Cartoon Network some years earlier, the network had no shame of trying to censor out all of the swear words.
Because Z doesn't care so much about us.
Clips from these censored broadcasts are extremely rare to come across, so if you've got a copy, then be sure to savor it. In 1999, DreamWorks direct-to-video division began pre-production on a sequel to Antz. However, at some point during the early 2000s, the project ended up being cancelled with no explicit reason given, and today there's virtually no other information about the sequel. The only thing that has resurfaced from the project is some test animation that repurposed dialogue from the first film.
I'm okay.
You? You're okay? Hey, who cares about you? I almost died here.
Please calm down. You're not going to let a little near-death experience ruin your mood, are you?
Hey, this is not a mood, okay?
Personally, I think it was for the best that we didn't get a sequel to Antz, as unlike a lot of other DreamWorks franchises, Antz doesn't really lend itself to a follow-up. It's not like films such as Kung Fu Panda or How to Train Your Dragon, where it's got characters that can grow and change from each entry, having an expansive world that can lend itself to more storytelling, or even like the Madagascar movies where there's an obvious cliffhanger to resolve. Antz is fairly self-contained, and it works quite well as a one-off story. But it would still be really fascinating to see the Antz 2 script. Who knows, maybe it might be actually better than what I'm giving it credit for. Hopefully one day, this and other DreamWorks projects will come to light.